So, hello everybody. This is a video I've been meaning to make for a little while now. Huge shout out to Walker's Country Life on YouTube. He's a fellow content creator about chainsaws, and he's part of the reason I got this idea. He originally made a video where he did some fingerboarding, and I watched the video, and he had a lot of questions, and I realized this isn't a topic covered much on YouTube. Not a lot of people know a lot about it. Dino Joe does it. Charles Briscoe has a couple of videos on a fingerboard saw he made, but there's no really good in-depth videos on the whys, what's it do, what's the purpose, when you would do it, and why you wouldn't do it. So to start off, I'm going to show you with what it is. So finger ports are these ports right here and right here. This is the lower transfer. Right there is the upper transfer. There you go. You can see it good here. So that's what the transfers after I finish work on look like. That's what they look like before. There's only that singular main transfer port on the upper and lower, and the lowers are much smaller, much narrower, and much shorter. Another big part is you also have to do some intake work, which you can see right there. You have to widen and drop the intake as well. And the reason you have to do that is because when you do this, as you can see, there is significantly more transfer volume, and it will flow significantly more air and fuel. When you do this, you need to be able to feed that both through the intake, which I tend to widen them. This is off a 038, so it comes from the factory with that lunging in it, which is that part right in the middle where you can see my finger. That just helps with the flow characteristics, especially on saws like this with a smaller carb. The other thing you have to do is I personally like widening and lowering the intake, or raising it in this case, so that you can get more exhaust flow, and just part of what you have to do while boarding. A big reason for doing this is you get more transfer volume, number one, and number two, you get a lot more case capacity. Case capacity is a major variable when porting. Increased case capacity moves the power band higher up into the RPM range, and it makes for less true bottom end, but moves the torque curve higher in the RPM range. That's why a lot of saws don't do this. It takes a very specific saw for finger ports, especially ones this big and this aggressive, to be really effective. Another great example of a saw that's been finger ported. Give me 1 second. Let's take this muffler off. This is the 046 cylinder I did up not too long ago for you guys. And you've seen a couple videos of this cylinder running. No long form videos, unfortunately. The saw, I can show you what happened to it, and that will bring me to a great point as to why you wouldn't do it. Again, benefits are more transfer flow, you get more flow through the transfers, and you can build a lot more power with them. There you go. Similar thing. Finger port. Intake. This is off of an 046, so that lunging that you can see right in here, right there, that I put in all in by hand. The roof of the intake was originally about at this level, square across. I moved it. Then the roof I lowered by only about 2 or 3 degrees on the actual intake. The piston on it, however, was a Wiseco dominant style piston. So it had a much shorter skirt. But as you can see, here's one of the transfers. It's trying to get so you can see it. Right there, and then right there. And as you can see, I widened the lower transfers, widened them, sloped them, made them nice and smooth, still get even left that rough texture. And what's really hard to see at this angle, but what is very important, is how the transfers open. So if you look at a stock saw, trying to think of a good way to show this, but with a stock saw, the transfers don't open perfectly flat all at the same time. So they start opening on this corner and slowly work over to this corner. So I have this finger port right here, this one, opening about 1 degree before this corner of the port opens. That 1 degree is not a hard limit. I just found that gave me the best mixture of throttle response and torque. And this corner opens about 1 degree after this corner. And finally, this transfer, the one closest to the exhaust port, opens about 1 degree after this corner opens. This one opens. This just gives a nice tapered opening. It helps with the flow. It helps just with the exhaust gases, getting them out of the exhaust port. Because if they all opened all at once, it would just flood the cylinder and there wouldn't be a good pattern to it. Unfortunately, the piston, I was able to reuse the piston. But the reason I had to take the cylinder off is it's going to be very difficult for you to see. But right there, around the top and bottom edges of the exhaust port, you can just see that color change. That is from the chrome flaking off. That just happened. It was a used cylinder, but that's why I had to stop using it. But as you can see, that's one major disadvantage is, as you can see, there's a lot less bearing surface right there and right there. So that puts a lot of wear right specifically on those 2 points in the chrome. And then, in general, you get less surface right there. So you get more wear in there. And then, over here, the stock transfers follow that line. So you get more wear on the piston skirt. And in the front here, that's one of the main reasons I don't bring these ports down this way. I've seen some people do them with great results. I just don't like doing that in my work saws, even in a lot of my play saws, because it causes a lot of ring wear. To go back over to this example, you can see just how wide I make them versus stock. Stock, the saw will run way longer than it will ported, especially this aggressively ported. This I was going to turn into more of a hot saw build. Unfortunately, I failed to notice. You can see right here that the chrome has started peeling off there, and all throughout the cylinder, around the exhaust, right in there, you can kind of see a patch where the chrome got thin. And here, right there, that dark line is another very thin spot in the chrome. That happened. This saw was bone stock. The only thing that this cylinder ever had done to it was I put in a pop-up piston on the 038 Super. But never had any port work until I started putting it in. And you could just see the chrome became too thin. So I, unfortunately, would have to get this cylinder re-chromed, which I might do because there's a few places near me that will do it for a very affordable price. But another thing, to get back to what I was saying earlier, so we went over why you would do it and why you wouldn't do it, what the benefits are and what some of the disadvantages are. Another thing that people don't talk with about these is how much it can change the power band. So, this saw, for example, this, just a regular 046. I did this saw in stages. I at first only lunged the intake, which you can see right here. You can see all that work right in there, which does actually make a big difference. And then I try and get for you to see. I raised the roof of the exhaust. I did some lower transfer work where I just widened them and flowed them a lot better. Originally, the transfers only started right about there. So I was able to get more flow into them. And that's all worked really well. Cut maybe 200-300 RPM higher than stock. But the moment I put these massive finger ports in, and these honestly aren't even that big compared to some, these finger ports changed that RPM range. It now cut about 2,000 RPM faster in the cut. If you guys want to know the exact numbers I used, I can pull those numbers up. But I wouldn't use a saw like this for daily use unless you really know what you were doing. Because it pulled so many RPM in the cut, it was very particular tuning. You had to run really good gas in it. You had to use proper mix ratios. And it still ran a little warm sometimes, especially in the summer. Another thing I did was, as you can see, polished exhaust port, perfectly smooth. That's a big thing with these saws. I don't do it for performance. I do it more so that carbon doesn't build up. As you can see, you can even see the shine and the reflection back there from the light. But that's another big thing they do, is they change where the power comes in because you're adding a lot more case capacity. That's a lot of the main things I wanted to cover was why you do it, why you wouldn't do it, what it does, what it is exactly, and just overall discussion about it. Another big thing that I want to talk about is some of the nomenclature you'll hear. So, these both, this one and this one, are both finger ports. This one, the one that goes over the intake, a lot of times people will call that the bridge port. Other things people have called bridge ports is go from here, the lower to the upper. I've seen some people make a little port just with a ball-nosed bit. Grind from there to there, grind channel in that to help the flow. I've also heard that called a bridge port. And then this one is just a finger port. I don't even always put that specific port in all saws. It depends on how aggressively I'm pouring the saw and who's going to be running it and how it's going to be run. This cylinder right here, it was the most powerful 046 I had ever made, but also it had issues tuning. It had issues. It just wasn't a happy saw that you'd be happy running with all day. Pulling up to the wood pile, just going cutting with some friends, or someone like me who enjoys struggling. Not struggling is the wrong word, but enjoys playing with the saws, playing with it. I'm okay with having to tune it a little more than normal. That was this cylinder. I apologize. It's a great saw, great cylinder. I loved how the timing numbers came out. I loved how the saw acted. And this cylinder, I am probably going to get re-chromed. This was the original cylinder for my 046, which I have next to me. You can't see it, I'll show it at the end. But I pretty much copied the same shape and geometry. I just didn't put in these two ports. The ones closest to the exhaust. Did not put that port or that port into that saw. When I take that saw back apart, I want to do a little bit more work. I most likely will put those ports in. At the time, I just want to get running, see how it ran without them. And it's a very strong saw, don't get me wrong. It just isn't as strong as this one was. Another thing about these finger ports that's really nice that I forgot to mention earlier is it makes changing your upper transfer timing a lot easier, because you can leave the upper transfers stock even, and if you want to change your blowdown, so you can't add blowdown, but you can take away blowdown, because if you cut this one in, the one that opens first, and cut it 1 or 2 degrees above where the other transfer opens rather than right exactly the same, it will actually change your transfer timing. Only a degree or 2, and that's about as much earlier as I'd want to go with them. But nonetheless, a lot of times that's all I'm changing the upper transfers if I wanted to. But this was just a overall quick discussion about finger ports. I will happily go deeper into depth with any part of this that anyone wants to learn about. Here's just more imagery of it. They're very easy to do. I can actually grab the exact bits I was using. They're simple to do, easy to learn how to do. The only thing is you can very quickly go too far, and when doing them, it's very easy to roll over your edges or roll out the cut and go skate right across your plane. These are the 3 bits I use. This is my overall favorite for all general purpose porting. This is the one I use a lot of times to get the shape of them correct, to get the actual outlet shape. This is just an overall good burr to use. It helps me get into some of the finer spots. And this I like using to finish once I get the cut established. I usually first, you can see this burr. The shape of it goes right in like that, and you bring it in, get where you want, get it in, like get through the cone, and slowly drag it back like this, back into where you want it. The other major thing that you have to do is, when you're doing this, I unfortunately don't have a piston ring for it, but you take the piston and the cylinder and you drop it in. You can look through the exhaust port sometimes to get your blowdown correct, and a lot of times it's just feel. And when you drop it in that piston ring, it will sit and allow you to take a Sharpie, pretend this is a Sharpie, and mark right around it to show where the uppers currently are set at. And then you can use the burr to go up, go a little past the line for the first one that you want to open, then come back a little underneath the line to show where you want this one to open. And then doing that, that'll get you your proper port timing. Let's see if I can do this to help keep my fingers out of the way. So this, you bring it a bit in, like that, and you just slowly drag it back like that. And when you bring it all the way out, get close up for you. You see how even they are, how nicely finished? That's what you're aiming for. And I shoot to have them enter right at the corner of where the lower transfers originally were. That's the best spot I found for the best airflow through them. Gives you the best wash pattern. And if you run this off for a little while and then take it off, you'd be able to see with the oil pattern where everything wound up and how it was flowing. It's one of the best pieces of advice I can ever give you is run maybe even just one tank through it, then take it off so you can see your wash patterns, both in here, on the actual roof, in the squish band, and you also want to check on your piston. This is a used piston, but so this comes down, air is pushed through, comes out there, up the transfers, and usually right about here is the wash pattern for the normal transfers. And right about here, you'd want one and another one right about there. That just would show you're getting a good wash pattern. You want the most flow out of that same mill one as stock, and a little through this one and a little through that one. And the other thing to keep in mind is, get this up. See how you can still see that full port even with the piston in? You still get full engagement, because if the port's wider than this, let's say your port comes all the way out to right about here. If your port's that wide, two things will happen. One, the piston's not supported on that corner, which leads to accelerated wear on this face. And two, the biggest thing is, yes, that's extra capacity, but that's blocked off. The only flow you get are actually through the ports and the piston on a piston-ported motor, and with transfers that are fed within the case, such as these. You get into something such as the 461, which has transfers that are fed from the front of the case rather than inside the cylinder. That gets into a different issue. But see how well I bring them right to the edge. That way I get the full flow I can. But overall, this is what you have to do to get the best flow characteristics. It's a lot of work. Just running this one transfer set took me, I want to say, almost an hour and a half. But this is the finish I'd leave it. I'm happy with the numbers, and I broke all the edges. I did all of that within about an hour and a half. Then figure another hour and a half for this one. You're at 3 hours. I take about an hour to get my exhaust perfect, get shaped the way I want. You want it to open in the middle first. You want it to open in the middle. You want it to open there, and then just sweep the corners in. That just helps preventing snagging a ring. And then I spend another hour getting the intake perfect. All in, I'm usually about 5-6 hours into the pouring, polishing, and all of that. Then you have to go in, clean everything very well. You need to make sure all the ports are chamfered. I like running my finger in there. Just run it in. Feel every one of your ports. And it should feel like glass. There shouldn't be any little burrs. If anything touches your finger, you need to go back in with sandpaper and sand it out. Or go back in with a diamond burr and smooth it out. But overall, it's a pretty simple thing to do, these finger ports. And they do add a lot of performance, and they can really change up how a saw runs. But I wouldn't do them on my first ever saw port. I'd wait until you get 2, 3, 4, 5 really well running saws before I even think about trying these. And another thing that can happen is, oh, that's unfortunate. I don't appear to have this video today. there it is. This is a risk whenever you're porting, but you can see right there. See all that silver? That's not the port, the finger getting that big. That's where the chrome, or in this case the nickel, peeled out of the cylinder. You can see on this side, hello? You can see how ragged that edge is on both sides. On both sides, the nickel peeled out, and I was unable to salvage the cylinder. Once the nickel or the chrome peels, the cylinder is junk. There's no saving it. That's why I love pouring these original Mahle cylinders. They're chromed, which you can't use Weisco chrome-faced rings with. You have to make your own thin ring to run on those pistons. But this is the toughest coating that you can port in my experience, and it holds up the best. That's why both of these have countless hours on before I poured them. This one had most likely thousands of hours on it. Then I ported it and put about another 100 on. Then I finger ported it and put about another 10 hours on it before the chrome finally failed. And I'm forever going to keep this cylinder. It's a great one to pull timing measurements off of. And that's why I have them written down, so I don't have to keep retiming it. But it's a great cylinder. This was the strongest running 046 I had ever run. And same goes for a lot of my friends. This one, I used as practice. As soon as I saw that chrome peeling, I realized I should keep it like this. Show people on video and in person difference between transfers that I've done work on and stock. I don't have actual numbers to tell you exactly how much more they flow, but in my experience, if you do the finger pouring that's in this cylinder or this cylinder, you can easily get 20-30% more than just your regular pouring gave you. When I put these in, I got about 15% more power than the original port job, which in itself was about 50% more power from a stock saw. That saw, I never got this exact cylinder on a dyno, but a good friend of mine who had the same numbers, same shapes, same everything, put his on a dyno and got a little over 10 horse. I think it came out to be 10.1 horse. Granted, that saw also had a little bit of carb work done to it, but it just shows these shapes. The polished exhaust, these fingers, and that lunged intake do make a lot of power. This lunged intake is not something I created. This cylinder had it from the factory. The saw was built in the 80s. This is something that's been going on for longer than people have been pouring saws, basically. Or longer than most people have been pouring saws, I should say. But this is a great demonstration of stock versus ported. If you guys have any other questions related to finger pouring or pouring in general, I would be happy to help you guys. I do have part 2 coming out very soon on this 3D printed intake bushing, or not bushing, intake adapter, and then video on this one is already out. Just search on my channel for 3D printed air intake, and the video should come up for you. But that's about all I have for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. And please, if you have any other questions, comments, or concerns, please put them in the description or in the comments. And again, a huge shout out to Walker's Country Life, who I will link in the description, for asking me some of these questions and helping inspire me to make this video to answer anyone else's questions. But here you are. That's a finger poured cylinder. And that's all I have for tonight, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And we're about to hit 100 subs within the first 2 weeks of me being on YouTube. I never thought that would happen. I was happy to see I got any subs at all the first week. But you guys have blown me away. Your comments have been awesome, and I really appreciate everyone who's been sticking around and watching these videos. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Thank you.